Okay, welcome everyone to this meeting of the Seattle Planning Commission. I'd like to start us off with a land acknowledgement. As we begin our meeting today, we'd like to respectfully acknowledge that our meeting is taking place on occupied Coast Salish land. We pay respect to Coast Salish elders past and present and extend that respect to their descendants and to all Indigenous people. And to acknowledge this land is to recognize the history, physical and cultural genocide and settler colonialism, which continues to displace Indigenous peoples today. It is to also recognize these lands, waters, and their significance for the resilience and wise peoples who continue to thrive in this region despite the consequence of displacement and broken treaties. Those who hold settler privilege in the city must work towards supporting the Coast Salish people and all Indigenous people using the various forms of wealth and privilege that we reap due to it. As a Seattle Planning Commission, we commit to being better listeners, learners, and to lifting up Indigenous voices, and to commit to identifying racist practices, to practicing allyship, and to strive to center restorative land stewardship rather than unsustainable and extracted use of the land. With that, with some announcements to members of the public and visitors. Welcome. We are happy to make all commission meetings open to the public, but please note that the Planning Commission does not hold public hearings since we are an advisory body. We provide recommendations to elected leaders who in turn make the actual decisions. We encourage individuals and organizations to provide their comments appropriately to elected officials directly. This meeting is a hybrid meeting with some individuals participating remotely while others are participating in person in room 370 of Seattle's City Hall. Is that right? Are you all in 370? It looks like you're in the boards and commissions room.
That's next week.
That's next week. Jamie, can you make sure you're reading from the December 12th chair's notes, which I sent yesterday, as opposed to the December 7th?
I should make sure I have the right notes in front of me.
I can send them again if you need them.
That's the problem when we have multiple notes. Let me double check. Yep, I'm on the wrong one. All right. Everything I've said so far is the same though, so we're good.
Correct.
Today we have folks in the boards and commissions room in Seattle City Hall. Next week they will be in room 370. All right. Our color brave space norms. We've been using those for a while, and for our newer commissioners, we will hopefully be doing a training on this, a refresher training at some point on these. But I'd like to ask a commissioner who'd be willing to volunteer to highlight one for us to hold today as we review today's agenda. This is the part where I volunteer if someone doesn't volunteer, so I will pause again. Okay, Caleb, would you be willing to do it? Oh, and then you raised your hand. It's like we knew. Okay, go for it.
I'll just highlight practice examining racially biased systems. Systems are what are left after all the people in this room leave.
Thank you, Caleb. That's a really good one for today because we have one agenda item today, which is a final working session on our letter regarding the proposed changes to the neighborhood residential development standards and the proposed changes to zoning in order to implement the new comprehensive plan. This is like one of our biggest responsibilities as a commission and stewards of the comprehensive plan. And I know y'all have been working real hard on this over the last several months. So before we jump to that though, we need to approve our minutes from November 14th. So can I ask for a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved, Michaela.
Thank you, Michaela. Is there a second? Rose
Caleb
seconds.
seconds.
Thank you, Rose. I think I heard Rose first. Thank you, Rose. Any changes or amendments to the minutes from November 14th? Okay. All those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Vanessa, I'm going to abstain because I was gone.
Okay.
Okay. With that, just a few quick reminders that our next full commission meeting is scheduled for Thursday, December 17th. This is not our usual full commission meeting time, so flagging this for you all. This is a special meeting. It's only half an hour from 8:30 to 9 a.m. And that meeting is also hybrid format. If you want to be in person, you can go to room 370 in Seattle City Hall or be online on Teams. And that will be to finalize and vote on this letter that we're discussing today. The December Land Use and Transportation Committee meeting is canceled for the holidays. So next week is really just your final meeting with us until 2025. And then I'll pass to Vanessa for any other commission business.
Great. Thanks so much, Jamie. As noted before, this is a hybrid meeting, and actually all commissioners participating are participating online. During the meeting, there will be opportunities for commissioners to provide comment, and I would ask that you put your name in the chat to be recognized. And we are going to try, as we're going through the letter today, to edit in real time. So if I'm not able to hear proposed edits, I may ask you to put that in the chat for the consideration of your fellow commissioners. Please don't put substantive matter in the chat, as although members of the public can see the chat, we really want to make sure for those who might be calling in that they can hear everything. I've received no public comment. We provide opportunities for public comment that is emailed to me in advance of the meeting, or for individuals who come and join us in the boards and commissions room. So we have no public comment right now. The gentleman who's joining us may choose to provide public comment at the end of the meeting. That will be his prerogative. So I will turn it over to Jamie for introductions. And after introducing yourself, please call on a fellow commissioner to introduce themselves or ask staff for assistance identifying a commissioner, and we'll wrap up with staff.
I don't know how I got muted. Okay, so please introduce yourselves as we go around. We'll call on folks or pass it around as you see fit if someone wants to jump in. Please say your name, your pronouns, if you want to say what area of work you are in, and what neighborhood you live in. And if you want to say your favorite holiday beverage, you can also say that, because that's what I'm thinking about right now. So I'm Jamie, use she, her pronouns. I co-chair the commission with Michaela, and I live in the future 130th station area. And I work in climate change and environmental justice. And I am really loving warm apple cider right now. So I will pass to Michaela.
Hi, Michaela Daffer, and she, her pronouns. I live in Capitol Hill, and I work in affordable housing policy and planning. And I am really digging Market Spices cinnamon orange decaf tea. It's a local tea purveyor down in Pike Place Market, and I highly recommend it. Really wonderful for this time of year. And I will pass it to Caleb.
Hi, my name is Caleb Twolday. He, him pronouns. I live in Beacon Hill and I work in education. And I'll pass it to Matthew Malloy.
Thanks, Caleb. My name is Matthew Malloy, he, him pronouns. I live in Green Lake and work at a restaurant and substitute teach. And I'll pass to my neighbor, Cecilia.
Hi, I'm Cecilia. I use she, her pronouns, and I live in the Roosevelt neighborhood. I work as a community organizer and disability advocacy on transportation and housing issues. And I am like so obsessed with eggnog. That is, yeah, my number one favorite thing about the holidays. And I will pass it over to Rose.
Hi all, I'm Rose Luchello-Whitson, pronouns they, them. I'm up in Licton Springs, and for my day job, I'm a professional wetland scientist and permitting specialist for Jacobs Engineering. I used to be team eggnog till I became dairy sensitive, and the non-dairy options taste a little strange to me, so now I'm team apple cider. I will pass to Zio.
Hi, Zio Alvarez, she, they pronouns. I work as a designer at Element Architects downtown, and I live in White Center, Highland Park. And I am currently making a bunch of coquito for the holidays, which is like a coconut rum mixed beverage. But yeah, I can't see the full list of folks, so if I could get staff's help with.
How about
whoever's left.
Radhika?
Hi everyone, I'm Radhika Nair. I use she, her pronouns. I live in Wedgwood in North Seattle. I work in planning and policy. And my favorite beverage is also hot apple cider. I'll pass to Andy.
Hi, Andy Dannenberg, he, him, live in Northeast Seattle and teach at University of Washington in public health and urban planning. And I'll go with the hot cider as a favorite winter drink.
I had no idea
next.
I had no idea we had so many team hot cider folks. Vanessa, take notes for our next retreat.
I'm on it. Let's move on to staff. How about Olivia? Thanks, sorry.
Hey everyone, Olivia Baker. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm staff to the Planning Commission. And I'm a big fan of hot cocoa this time of year, especially peppermint hot cocoa. So that's usually my winter drink. John?
Hi, everybody. I'm John Hoy. I'm staff to the Planning Commission. I use he, him pronouns. I am definitely not a pumpkin spice latte person, so therefore I'm not an eggnog latte person. But if I were to make something up, I don't drink this, but something like a peppermint white chocolate mocha sounds really good.
Excellent. I'll round us off. My name is Vanessa Murdoch. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the executive director of the Seattle Planning Commission. It's a hard choice, but I'm going to go with eggnog, which I try to really limit my consumption of for just a week during December, not the full month of December. So thanks all for introducing yourselves. We do have a number of members of the public on the call, so thank you all for joining us. And with that, I will turn it back over to Jamie.
Thanks, Vanessa. Yes, also a big fan of eggnog in coffee, I've recently discovered. So thanks all for indulging that. So we have one agenda item today, our final working session on the letter regarding proposed zoning changes to implement the One Seattle plan. We are setting aside the balance of our meeting to discuss and finalize our comment letter on the proposed neighborhood residential development standards and the proposed zoning maps to implement the One Seattle plan. Today is our final opportunity to suggest any text-specific edits to the letter. No new content will be accommodated. So this is really about just getting how clearly can we articulate things that are already in there, not adding new items. Text-specific edits suggested and agreed to today will be incorporated into the final letter, which we will take action on the December 17th Planning Commission meeting. So that special meeting that we flagged at the beginning. We must take action on December 17th in order to meet the deadline for comments, which is December 20th. Currently, 9 commissioners have indicated they will attend the December 17th meeting. So if you've not RSVP'd already, please do so. It's extremely important that we get quorum for that meeting. That is the minimum number of commissioners. So 9 commissioners have RSVP'd so far. That is the minimum we need to take action. So if you've not RSVP'd, please reply. We're still waiting on 6 folks to reply on their attendance. And if you agreed to come, please make sure you actually come so that we can for sure get that letter passed. All right, I will pass it back to Vanessa.
Great. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to give planning commissioners 5 minutes to review the most recent draft, staff draft, that has been developed in collaboration with commissioners over the last several weeks since the release of the proposed zoning changes and proposed development standards for the neighborhood residential zones. That those materials were released in mid-October. And we have dedicated every full commission meeting and committee meeting since that time to develop the letter that we're going to discuss today. So I'm giving everyone, all the commissioners, 5 minutes. It's 3:21, so at 3:26, I will share my screen and we will walk through the letter. If you're looking for the staff draft letter, I sent it to you all via email just prior to this meeting, along with the link, the Teams link, and I also sent that earlier this week, I believe on Tuesday. So please take 5 minutes, and for members on the call, members of the public on the call, you will be able to see the letter as we move through it once commissioners have had the 5 minutes to read the letter. And with that, I give you all 5 minutes. It's 3:22, so we will I'll bring you all back at 3:27. Can you help me remember to save the chat? One of us should save the chat before we end the meeting, especially if they're text specific.
Yep.
All right. I'm going to call everybody back to the meeting. I'm going to share my screen and not leave the meeting, which I tend to do because the buttons are close. And we are going to walk through the letter. And I would like to just remind everybody on the call, this is a draft. This is a staff draft. Once we conclude today's meetings, proposed revisions and edits that are text specific that you all offer for the consideration of your colleagues will be incorporated into the final draft, which will be finalized on Monday and posted to our website for members of the public to take a look at if they're interested. Again, we will be taking action on this letter at the December 17th special meeting of the Planning Commission that is from 8:30 to 9. There will be opportunities for public comment before and after the commission takes action on the letter. With that, I will ask if you all can see my screen and either nod or give me a verbal yes. Can you see my
Yes,
screen, Jen?
but
Yeah.
it's
Okay, thanks.
cut off, Vanessa. I don't know if you're trying to see the whole paragraph. The view is like,
Got it. Is that better?
yeah, that's good. That's perfect.
Perfect. Okay. So I'm going to walk through sections of the letter, and I will pause after each section and ask commissioners if there are any text-specific edits to propose. And if I can't type fast enough, I will ask you to put that in the chat. And please note your name in the chat as well. So the first part of the letter is just reminding everybody getting the letter that the Salem Planning Commission are stewards of the city's comprehensive plan, and that our last comment on the draft One Seattle plan was released in April of this year. I've hyperlinked that comment letter within this letter. And then we note that this letter focuses on the specifics of proposed neighborhood residential zoning changes and development standards, as well as some common themes across the proposed neighborhood center zoning maps. We do anticipate, the commission anticipates further comment on the One Seattle plan once it is transmitted by the mayor to city council. We anticipate that happening at the end of this year, 2024, or early in 2025. And for that reason, this letter is very specific to the materials that were released in mid-October by the Office of Planning and Community Development. We will make more in-depth comments on the plan once that final plan is released, including comments on the proposed growth strategy. We then move into the parts of the proposed zoning update that we appreciate, and we've noted them here. Increase in maximum floor area ratio in neighborhood residential zones up to 1.2, which will make adding additional density with family-sized units more feasible. Inclusion of new neighborhood centers concept place to bring more residential near existing transit and services to more areas of the city. Appreciate the creation of the stacked flat bonus to encourage this more affordable and more accessible housing type. And then the improvements to the affordable housing bonus based on input from affordable housing developers to increase the feasibility of affordable housing projects in neighborhood residential zones. And finally, appreciate the helpful materials that were produced by the Office of Planning and Community Development that were shared online in the format of an interactive GIS portal, as well as a number of informational boards that were displayed and handouts at the series of open houses that the city has held over the last number of weeks. I'm going to pause there and see if there are any proposed changes to what you see on the screen right now. John, if you see a comment, let me know, because I can't see it.
Michaela's in the chat.
Thank you so much. I can't share my screen and look at the chat at the same
Do you
time.
want me? Do you want me to call it out, Vanessa?
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay. So we have Michaela first, and then Matt.
All right. Thank you for providing us with an opportunity to talk about the letter today. As always, I'm really appreciative of having staff who produce a draft for us to react to. So any edits that I offer today are acknowledging that you guys did all of the heavy lifting and we are in refinement mode here today. And so some of my comments might seem sort of minor, but just trying to tighten up some of the language. One of the things that I do when writing long bullet point lists that are formatted as one big long sentence is I start each of the bullets with a lowercase letter, or since it's a continuation of a statement. So I would suggest making the thes all lowercase. And then sometimes I wonder if family size housing, everybody knows what that means. And sometimes I think it limits what I hope we try and do with larger units, which is to make them accessible to not just people who are families, but roommates and folks who want to live together in different arrangements. So for the first language, the first bullet, I'm proposing the change to say, in residential zones up to 1.2, which increases density, making housing for larger households more feasible. And then a small change on the other one where the word bring more density just didn't sit well with me. So I'm suggesting it place type to increase residential density near existing transit and services. That's it. And I will put these changes in the chat box so I can see if we got them right on the screen.
Thank you. Do you mind repeating your proposal for the first bullet?
Yeah.
Michaela, thank you.
Which increases density, comma, making housing for larger households more feasible.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you. Next up.
Great. I'll echo Michaela's thanks to the staff for preparing this letter. I had a really minor change, and again, I'm in school to be a math teacher, not an English teacher. So I want to preface that. Everywhere else in the letter, when we have bullet points, we end in a complete sentence. I think it's easier to just kind of make those bullet points complete sentences in this case. And that would mean undoing the lowercase t's. Open to keeping it how it is, but I think it looks tighter with just complete sentences, and then we're consistent through the letter. Michaela, do you have any thoughts on that specifically?
I love that. I love consistency throughout letters, so appreciate that. Yeah.
Great. If anybody else objects, please let me know.
We will loop back on that. I don't, watching me type is probably like watching paint dry. So I will capture as much as I can. And luckily John is here taking notes as well. So
make a note to remind yourself to get rid of the lowercase t's, and that's it.
Will do. Will do. All right. Any other comments on these bullets? Okay, I'm going to move us on to overarching comments on the implementation of the One Seattle Plan. So as you all reviewed the preferred growth strategy, proposed zoning changes, rather than go into detail on each specific neighborhood center, the commission wanted to make sure that they captured some overarching comments that may be fleshed out in the new year when the mayor releases his final plan. So commission is offering the following overarching comments to support implementation of the plan. We'd like to see more neighborhood centers added and for the proposed neighborhood centers to be slightly larger. The commission feels that the plan as proposed does not go far enough to provide more places with additional housing choices across the city for people of all income groups. I'm not going to read all of these because everybody on the call, including members of the public, will be able to listen in, but I just want to hit the main points. The commission continues to have concerns about the anti-displacement strategies that are included as an appendix to the plan, and looking at the proposed zoning changes and the proposed changes to the development standards in the neighborhood residential zones, the commission remains concerned that the city's anti-displacement strategies are insufficient to deal with potential outcomes from the proposed level of change. I linked to our previous paper on anti-displacement. So for those reading this letter when it is finalized, we note our concerns that we have noted before. The commission also has noted a level of disappointment that this plan doesn't go very much far beyond what is required by the state mandates, specifically related to HB 1110. We'd like to see the plan and its implementation through zoning be bolder as appropriate for a 20-year vision. And I think this is the last bullet. Yes, last bullet. The plan should look further ahead and strategically seed growth for future development patterns that benefit the city. So I'm going to pause there.
For this section, we have 2 names so far. If anyone else has comments on this one, go ahead and put your name in the chat. And we're just going to do this whole section. So I have Matt and then myself and then Michaela.
Yep. Thanks, Jamie. So my point is not about any of the specific paragraphs, but the order. I think the third paragraph about we're disappointed the plan does not reach much beyond the minimum changes required by state mandates should be the first bullet point. It's a bigger picture idea, and it summarizes kind of a lot of the other smaller bullet points we make in paragraph 1, 2, and 4. And then if anybody else is interested in this, I would not be opposed to making the 4th paragraph kind of a concluding paragraph for the entire letter, because we start to introduce new ideas here. I'm also okay keeping it in place if no one else is interested in that. But main thing, 3rd paragraph, I think should be first because it is a broader idea. And thank you, Zio, for agreeing.
Okay. My comments about the anti-displacement bullet point of this section. I just had a small tweak to the sentence that starts as noted in our previous paper on displacement. I just wanted to make sure we were highlighting not just households and businesses, but because we've also talked about like cultural anchors and and other like nonprofit organizations that are also being displaced. And so I think I have some language that I put in the chat that is basically saying, same thing in the beginning, as noted in a previous paper, increases the density without sufficient anti-displacement strategies can lead to less socially economic diverse cities, as vulnerable households, cultural anchors, and culturally relevant businesses and nonprofit organizations are pushed out due to blah, 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 blah. Same. So put it in the chat as a suggestion. And that stays consistent with what we have put in that previous paper.
Thank you, Jamie.
Michaela.
I have a suggested change on the first paragraph about neighborhood centers, or first bullet point, to just tighten up the language about not going far enough. Felt like a little long, so I'm suggesting on the second sentence, saying the plan does not adequately increase the ability of all residents in Seattle to live in the neighborhood of their choice. And then in the third sentence, I'd like to add a third category there. So after putting a comma after renters, striking and then after low-income households, put and people with disabilities. Because I think that mid-rise and other types of housing types we're talking about would create buildings with elevators that are accessible. And then the other component about moving housing into Seattle's neighborhoods, new amenities like parks, schools, and quiet tree-lined streets. The other thing that those quiet streets offer are slower speeds and therefore are safer streets. So maybe adding in the term slower speed there. And I know we keep adding on, we added on to this concept at our last meeting. And so I'm not opposed to not putting in slower speeds because I'm not sure that's something we've talked about previously. And I put in the chat box the language that I'm proposing.
Thanks all. I'm realizing that without having two screens for me to be able to look at the chat, my idea of being able to edit in real time is not really working. And as I said, it would be like watching paint dry for all of you. So what I'm asking you all to do, as you're not sharing your screen, is to reference the chat, and at the conclusion of our discussion, I'll ask you all to go back and scroll through the chat to make sure that you agree with all the points that have been made. These are all great edits. They're a little more extensive than I expected, so, and I'm not the fastest typist, so please keep them coming. But as opposed to editing on the screen, I'm going to ask you all to be referring to your chat. For members of the public listening in, you do have access to the chat, so you can see all of that. I apologize to our member of the public here in the boards and commissions room and anybody calling in, because you will not be able to see the chat, but you will be able to see our final letter posted to our website on Monday afternoon.
Can I say something?
Sure.
So this is John, by the way. Since I have access to both the chat and the document, I'm working offline, not on the version that Vanessa has on the screen. If you could please, anytime you're proposing text, if you could include the full sentence, like, for example, Michaela just did, with your changes, that's really helpful. I am literally just going to copy from the chat and put it into the revised document. That's really helpful. Instead of maybe pointing out specific words that you want to change, just maybe, if you can, put in the whole sentence and copy it in the chat.
And adding to that, also note what page you are on and what paragraph or bullet, because at the end of the chat, it all starts to kind of combine, and it's hard to track exactly what we were talking about. So thank you all for your patience as we jointly finalize a letter with amongst 10 people.
I think Matt had another comment.
Yeah, mine relates to Michaela's suggestion for that same many renters line. I'm sending it to the chat now. I think we should get rid of the quiet portion. I think it kind of reinforces this idea of like the single family neighborhood of suburbia, and also it's just, I think, nicer to just have 3 points and not have the and quiet tree line streets. Just grammatically it bothers me, but I think, we want a bustling, vibrant community, and quiet, I think, is contrary to that. So just that's my one piece.
I'll Mike, should I put my name in the chat? Okay. Oh, my comment or kind of response to that is like, I think what it's trying to get at is that there is a disparity in the city in terms of noise pollution, in terms of who lives along major corridors versus who gets to live in like a quote unquote quiet neighborhood, right? And so if you're putting housing in places that are, off, because there's another bullet point later, right, about off of major arterials and just even a block off or anything like that. So, and maybe the word isn't quiet, like maybe there's some other way to describe that, or maybe it belongs in a different place. But I think that's what the intention might have been behind that.
Yeah, just because we're conversing, I don't mind low traffic, Olivia, and I hear you, Jamie. I think we do corridors and heavily traffic corridors, and that's how our growth strategy is informed right now. Maybe quiet is not the right word, but I like low traffic or something like that.
Does low traffic work for you, Jamie?
Yep.
Seeing a nod. Okay. Great. Any other thoughts on these, the sort of overarching themes? Not seeing or hearing any.
See Michaela.
Okay.
This one,
Thanks, Olivia.
I tried to make this an inline edit, but I didn't know what to do with it. But the paragraph or the bullet that starts with that is about the state mandates. We say the plan should look further ahead and strategically see growth for future development patterns that benefit the city. For example, then we leave with a bunch of questions. And grammatically, I understand what you were trying to do, but you say seed growth, you don't call on the city planners to use those questions in some way. And so, sorry, this is like minor, but I kind of got tripped up on it. And I was like, what are we trying to tell them to do? Are we trying to tell them to use these questions when they revise the plan over the next few months? Maybe the use of questions instead of statements was what was tripping me up. I don't know. I can totally live with it if this is diving too far into the weeds. Oh, and I'm sorry, the version of the document I'm looking at has something different in it. So maybe I'm referencing an older version.
Are you looking at staff draft 12/10/24, page 207?
Yeah. Plan should look further ahead and sorry, and I'm going back to yours. Yeah, mine is formatted differently. Weird. And the seating was part of a bigger statement. I don't know I don't know what happened with the version I'm looking at. Can you scroll down for a minute? Do other people's drafts look like, are the questions formatted as bullets? And does the primary bullet start with the commission is disappointed that this plan does not reach beyond?
Yes.
Maybe it works as a standalone bullet. Why don't we circle back to me at the end of the meeting? And if there's time, we can work to address this. I don't want to hold us up. Sorry.
That's okay. And yes, let's circle back because we also talked about, or Matt suggested that this bullet actually move to the conclusion. And unfortunately, I can't do a version comparison live and run the meeting at the same time. So I'll make sure we have time at the end to circle back to the bottom of page 2.
I am comparing the versions, and the version that was sent out this afternoon is different than the one that was sent a couple of days ago.
Okay.
So, Michaela, you're right. The version that was sent out a couple of days ago did have bulleted questions. And the one that was sent out right before this meeting does not. This section has 4 bullets in the version that was sent out today. And the version that was sent out a few days ago only has 3 bullets and then some sub bullets with questions at the end. So I think we need to decide which one we're working on.
Right. And if I'm remembering correctly, I don't think the verbiage changes. It's really trying to have some consistency in layout and not having too many bullets with sub bullets with sub bullets. I do not believe the language and intent has changed. But again, I'm going to suggest that we move on. But sorry, go ahead.
Could I just see on your screen what is above what the second bullet point is? Second main bullet point. Can I see what's above that? Well, go. No, go down. You're good. Keep going. A little bit more. Okay, I'm oriented now. Thank you.
Great.
Okay. Dylan, I see your hands up. Are you intending to put your name in the chat?
Oh, yeah, I just put my name in the chat. I had a follow-up question to what Michaela was talking about.
Go for it.
Just wanted to pose. I get where Michaela's coming from. I believe with kind of what the intent of the questions are, what they're offering, what they're asking of the city to do with the plan, and maybe it's the plan should look further ahead strategically and see growth for future development patterns that benefit the city. For example, the plan should respond to the following questions, and then list the questions.
There we go. Thank you. You fixed it for me. That works for me. Yeah.
I'm going to type that up and I'll put it in the chat.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Thanks all. I'm going to move us along. We now have a list of recommendations that are associated with specific topics. And I'm going to take them one at a time, and I am going to keep my eye on the time. I think we have ample time, but I may need to move us along because we do have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages of the letter left and an hour and 25 minutes. So let's start with accessibility. And rather than reading it aloud, I'm going to let you all take a minute to read it and put your name in the chat if you have a text-specific edit to suggest.
Oh, Cecilia.
Yeah, I'll put in the chat too, but I'm looking at the second to last sentence, and the city should work toward more accessible design. And I know this is kind of repetitive if we say universal design because we mentioned it in the sentence before, but I think that universal or inclusive design is a little more appropriate because I think a huge issue in accessibility is that people with disabilities and non-drivers are not likely to be able to live near commercial, like all the places that make it easier to live in the city, given like the lack of retail in transit corridors. So anyways, I think that universal design and inclusive design thinks more holistically about like, can people get all of their services? Like, how are we designing communities for all ages? Whereas like accessible design can be pretty limiting in just thinking like, do we have an accessible house here? Can we get in front of this, like inside the store?
So Cecilia, are you suggesting to replace accessible design with universal design in the highlighted sentence?
Yeah. Yeah. Or
Any additional?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I know like Redmond is using inclusive design instead of universal design, but again, these are none of, like we haven't talked about any of this. So yeah, but I just wanted to add that.
Would it be helpful to say universal and inclusive to cover our bases?
I think maybe universal for like clarity. I think universal is fine.
Okay.
I'm just thinking about, we just said universal design in the sentence before, but I think that's appropriate.
Any additional thoughts?
Maybe universal design is design that is universally appropriate for everybody. I'm just thinking of replacing universal design with what it achieves. The city should work toward more. That's fine, whatever. No, I can live with it. I don't mind the repetitive nature of universal design. I'm fine.
And Cecilia, I just want to make sure in this version, this includes your edits that you proposed, that you sent to Olivia and me earlier this week, correct?
Correct.
Great. Okay, good.
And universal design is like a clear concept people can look up.
Great. So under affordable housing bonus, Commission appreciates the affordable housing bonus and suggests adding a similar bonus in low-rise and mid-rise zones to encourage more income-restricted affordable housing units and buildings in neighborhood centers. Any thoughts on this?
It doesn't look like it. We can move on.
Okay, move on. Thanks, Jamie. Help me move
We got
us
a
along.
last minute. Sorry, we got a last minute. Cecilia.
Yeah, sorry. I just had a question. I know it wasn't at the meeting on Thursday, but I was wondering why social, I guess we put social housing again, but why we took the social just for social housing, why we took that out here.
Social housing has its own bullet, and because all the bullets are they're arranged in alphabetical order rather than trying to debate which is more important and priority. So the social housing developer has its own bullet that we managed to develop at the last meeting, where there was trying to balance the concerns regarding providing incentives for what the market will provide. So we will get to social housing. It'll just be when we get to the S's down the list.
Page 7.
Page 7. I will note that Matt Hutchins had strong feelings about this. He was not able to He's a commissioner. He was not able to join us at this meeting, but he did respond to me that he was supportive of the language as it is in this draft. I'm going to move us to arterials and frequent transit routes. And again, give you all the chance to read through that and put your name in the chat if you've got a proposed text edit.
Got Michaela so far.
So my first comment that I had was that there were lots of paragraphs under this heading. Did you change that, Vanessa?
I believe what I tried to do in the final edit is really just to condense things and not actually break into paragraphs under these subheaders, sort of
Great.
in the interest of being concise and not having a 12 or 13 page letter.
Yeah. I had the same inclination, and so I think the version that was sent out a couple days ago had several comments underneath this heading, so appreciate that change. I do have a couple of changes here about talking about the housing on arterials. My first comment would be that replacing thoughtful with equitable. Because I think there's this the issue here is sure the city's maybe not using is being not very like unthoughtful in the way that they're doing this corridor strategy, but it's an equity issue and an environmental justice issue for folks who are going to live along the roads. And then we don't draw the connection between multifamily housing along arterials and who's most likely to live in those units, which is lower income people, and it's where the city's proposing to accommodate folks income restricted housing. And so just wanted to draw that connection by adding in a statement noting that the multifamily is the primary housing type that the city projects to be affordable to low-income households. And then later on, I suggested a change to Jamie's point earlier that we add in vibrations and noise pollution. I'm trying to find myself in my comment versus what I see on the screen. We would like to see a balance between so people who live on loud, dangerous arterials with poor air quality, noise pollution, and vibrations from traffic. And that's all in the chat.
Great. Thank you.
That was all your comments, Michaela? Just to make sure I cover. Okay. Dylan is next.
Yeah, I just had a clarifying comment. I'll put it in the chat. Wanted to talk through it for a second. Where we talk about likening the criteria for establishing the walk shed, the 4-minute walk along our arterial. We liken it to what's been used to determine the radius of neighborhood centers. I just wanted to clarify that the intent of that sentence. So it says this criterion has already been determined by the city to be an appropriate distance from a transit stop for upzoning neighborhood centers. I wanted to clarify. Typically, what they're doing is are they not identifying the central location of the neighborhood center, and then providing a 4-minute walk radius from what was determined to be the center of the neighborhood center, but it's not from a transit stop. Is my read of that correct? Can others weigh in? maybe I'll just pose this, what I'm proposing to change it to is that this criterion has already been determined by the city to be an appropriate walking distance for establishing the baseline radius of neighborhood centers.
Vanessa or John, do you know the answer, or Olivia, the answer to that question? If they're using radius or using transit, like the center of a neighborhood center, or they're using transit stops or transit as the.
My understanding is that it was often either a central transit stop or a central intersection of a neighborhood. So it could have been either, and often those are one and the same. So not every
Okay.
neighborhood center is around a transit stop. Some are just a major intersection, but many of them are both.
Okay, well, maybe we're getting into the weeds then. So if that is indeed the case, then I'm fine with it as it's written.
Dylan, I think your revised language works though by removing the specific reference to a transit stop.
Yeah, I mean,
just in case that is not.
Might be a bit more accurate. Thanks.
Sounds good. All right, Cecilia? Sorry.
Yeah. I know, not trying to add new things, but one thing, so hopefully this doesn't fall under that. I think one thing for me that's really lost in this section is that, especially for people with disabilities and non-drivers who are probably going to live in these arterials where it's less expensive, is the limited access to just like retail and business opportunities, because I think being able to walk and access those services in your neighborhood is just like a vital part of living in a livable city. And so I think that with the 4-minute walk shed, part of like the way that it is framed is that connects you to so many like vital and central parts of the neighborhood. And so I think that the fact that there's no like retail options on the transit corridors is it's like part of the problem. So I suggest on the I can put copy and paste, but we recommend using a 4-minute walk shed or a 4-minute walk from the arterial to expand denser housing. And I suggest just adding housing and commercial opportunities to kind of make that more concise, but make everything I said more concise.
So Cecilia, if you could give a minute and put specific language in the chat, and maybe even like copy and then paste the full section and note where you're adding. The position where we're in right now is that we need to leave this meeting with very clear direction to staff and agreement amongst commissioners on the call to what the language is that you are all comfortable with. And so, and that's why we've said we can't accommodate not new content. I'm not suggesting what you're saying is new content, but staff needs really very specific direction in order to turn around the final letter by Monday that hangs together and is consistent and captures all of the great ideas that are being brought up today.
Yeah, I will find the sentence, but and just copy and paste. But all I'm suggesting is that when we say expand denser housing opportunities, we include denser housing and commercial opportunities. But I'll find it in my draft.
I've got that change.
Okay, thanks. Great. Any other thoughts on arterials frequent transit routes section?
Doesn't look like it.
Oh, there's more.
Unless there's a last minute. Yeah, I suggested in the chat, Vanessa, that we go by section.
Yep.
So you shouldn't have to feel like you have to read through it all. So for folks, this included in this section is the main streets, destination streets, all these sub things up until we get to corner stores. So if you have any comments on the content between the header arterials and frequent transit routes and the beginning of corner stores, this is your opportunity.
Thanks, Jamie.
So Dylan,
Just a quick one. To the ability is possible. I mean, the images are tough to read, so if we can make them larger, that would be helpful. I would just, if we can just widen them to the margins, be my one suggestion.
Great.
that's a good point actually, because this even with it being small, I wasn't really sure what we were trying to say here with the images. It just says like, look at the map showing here's a zoning map and here's a destination streets map. But like, what are we trying to point out with that? Like how they overlap, or because then we should
I think
explicitly say that.
Yeah, I think and I'll try to channel Lauren Squires here. If you look at the sentence that's right before that, the commission recommends referencing the various street types identified in the Seattle Transportation Plan, and then a link to the technical report and the page number, so that the work that done through the Seattle Transportation Plan actually informs the land use that is occurring, and to tie those together. And then this is an example that that Lauren provided. We can certainly get those images larger. What Lauren's suggestion was that basically that the Seattle Transportation Plan and the comprehensive plan and the implementation zoning for the comprehensive plan should be consistent and reinforce each other.
Ah. Can we explicitly say that?
Well, the commission sees an opportunity for the comp plan to integrate with the Seattle Transportation Plan. Different street types can serve as logical connections between centers and include appropriate land uses between these centers.
Yeah,
Commission-
I read that, and that's not how I interpreted, and but how you explained it.
Yeah.
So I can suggest in the chat, but so what my thought was, using the exact words you said earlier, of like to ensure consistency between the two plans, right?
Yes.
We have a couple of things on this piece. Michaela has a suggestion.
I think Dylan's before me.
Dylan, I think
I did just,
yeah.
I did just go.
That was
I
the
had,
image.
Oh, okay,
yeah,
sorry.
I had language related to that image that I'm just going to put in the chat. I don't think I need to
Okay.
talk further though.
Okay. So Vanessa, I felt like you were kind of venturing into new topical territory with the text that starts at the top of this page from arterials. And so I was suggesting that we name this first paragraph connecting centers, and then where you started the text, see Jamie edit. That also sort of feels like a new concept. And so I was suggesting naming that section, putting in a line break and naming that section Seattle Transportation Plan Integration. That's it.
Love it, Michaela. Then we had Matt also likes that, maintains existing alphabetical order. Sort of. And Cecilia.
All right, trying to find my mute. I think I'm gonna, I was confused at what we were showing with the maps, that they look pretty similar, but I think I've looked at the maps long enough that I'm gonna think my comment is maybe resolved.
Zio, did you want to comment on the images there?
Yeah, I don't know that I think they're more confusing than helpful, because the map scales are slightly and alignments are slightly different. And if the point of that section is just that the zoning changes should be in alignment with the transportation plan, then I feel like stating that and pointing to that plan and citing the relevant text is enough. But if other people disagree, then I'm also fine with them being there.
It sounds like there's at least 4 of us that were confused by the images. Maybe 5. So. Matt.
I think I'm confused by the images. But then the paragraph, and now I'm wondering if I'm on a different. Oh no, never mind. My question has been resolved. Thank you.
Okay, great. Dylan.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, the images are great if we can clearly explain what it is they're trying to show. And I mean, they're showing that there's commercial cores on the zoning map that align with the destination streets, the Seattle Transportation Plan. But it's very wonky, that comparison. Yeah. And it took me a second, but I'm there now. But and so I want to respect, are they just confusing people? Because it is making a point, and it is there, and there's a correlation. That's what we're showing, is this correlation between destination streets and the commercial cores in neighborhood centers. But if we're not making that point clearly enough and it's just causing confusion, then I could entertain the idea of removing them. But I do like the idea of having a graphic. So I'm just kind of throwing that out there to the group.
I'm inclined to remove the graphics because I agree they're not the same scale, they are not in the same style, and they came to us too late to be able to develop for staff to be able to develop our own graphics. And given the rewording and the distinguishing the sections as suggested by Michaela, I think I'm going to suggest I too like graphics when they are supporting the text and vice versa. Enough people have said that they don't get what they're trying to get at, and so I'm going to suggest we defer to text and remove them unless there's heartache on the call by removing them, because we do not have the time and resources to redevelop to create new maps. And fully vet them with this group before approving the letter.
Hey, Michaela.
I suggest bolding strolling streets and non-arterial bike network to be consistent with the bolding of the street types above it.
Thanks, Michaela.
Always go for some copy editing.
Any other thoughts?
Radhika agrees with removing images as well.
Okay.
All right, I think we're on to corner stores.
Go corner stores. Okay. Again, I'm going to let you read them as opposed to me reading them. I will note for commissioners who haven't been able to attend every single meeting that we've had on this, the language that you see is a compromise amongst various commissioners who there was general support for corner stores and for removing some of the limitations. There was not consensus on exactly what limitations should be removed, and it was decided I believe at the last meeting that rather than get into the specifics of location, hours, and other specifics, to just voice in general support for this, understanding that it won't necessarily be, if it continues on, if it gets approved, it won't be a pilot project, but it will. We're not anticipating, the city isn't anticipating overnight to have corner stores on every corner and in every neighborhood. So the language that you see before you is that was crafted and agreed to by some differing opinions, but general consensus around the idea of supporting the stores.
All right. Last chance. Any comments on corner stores before we move to design standards and land use code specifics? I think we're good. Oh, Dylan, last minute.
Yeah.
Okay, Dylan.
Just one simple add. At the end of the corner stores paragraph, robust network of neighborhood-based retail will help improve convenient walkable access to daily needs and services.
Done.
Thanks.
Great. All right. Now design standards and land use code specifics.
Okay. So these recommendations were brought forward by commissioners who may be a little more familiar with interpreting the land use code and design standards and how that impacts feasibility. There was general agreement amongst commissioners in discussing this. For those of you who are not architects and developer architects, the level of specificity may seem greater than in perhaps other parts of the letter. However, it was discussed and thought that these recommendations were important enough in order to keep the spirit of the proposed zoning changes to really take advantage of as many lots as possible and not hamstring development on, for instance, parcels with mapped steep slope environmental critical areas that actually may be just retaining walls created, man-made retaining walls that then exempt that whole parcel from redevelopment to the level that the neighborhood residential development standards, which are in response to the state mandate, would allow.
All right. Any comments on this section? Michaela.
I don't know I know what SDCI means. You might want to spell that out for the reader, although OPCD staff also know what that means. What's a tip chrome? Is it a typo?
It's partially a typo and partially, so SDCI, it's not a director's rule, but it is an interpretation of a director's rule that's meant to be more straightforward. And it actually was specifically referenced by another commissioner who unfortunately couldn't be on the call. I will definitely, so basically SDCI tip 327A is hyperlinked here. And if you go to it and you look on page 2, there is an exemption process. And the commissioner that recommended this thought it was important to recognize that the city already does have an exemption process, but that it may not be as apparent to individuals who are maybe developing for the first time and who look at the map and say, oh, my lot's mapped as steep slope, I can't do anything with it.
Yeah, I clicked on the tip. I didn't see it described as a chrome anywhere.
Yeah, the chrome is a typo. Thanks for catching that.
Okay. So and it just kind of felt redundant. You were basically saying tip twice. So you probably, yeah, anyway, it's more of a minor comment. Sorry to cause you to explain the whole thing.
No, that's
and then
great.
Down below, as we get further away from the legislative session where House Bill 1110 was passed, I think we should put 2021 in front of it and then spell out HB, House Bill, so it's a little bit easier for folks to read.
So right here, put
right there in front of HB. And then spell out replace HB with House Bill.
Yes.
and a space between Bill and 1110.
Thank you.
Dylan, you had your hand up briefly for this section. Did you still have something, or it got
It was
resolved?
just the tip, explaining the tip, but it sounds like you guys took care of it. Just a simplification of a director's rule or of a zoning code. Or yeah.
And
so-
it's not a Chrome, it's just a tip.
It's just
Yeah. Just a tip.
All right. Shall we move on? No other comments?
moving on to neighborhood centers. And I'm just gonna, oops, where are we? Neighborhood centers. So here we're recommending changes to the criteria used to determine the boundaries of and zoning within the neighborhood centers. This was discussed as an approach within the time frame that the commission has had to review and comment on the proposed zoning changes, not having the capacity to go through each of the 30, I think they are, neighborhood centers, such as Dylan has done, but instead to go one step higher up and talk about the criteria that that the city has used to establish the neighborhood centers and the boundaries, and make recommendations on how those criteria might be changed. So I'm going to scroll down and see if I can get all bullet points on the screen here. Yes. Well, no, I can't. This is a big section.
I think it's probably better to keep it zoomed in, Vanessa, because we can't read it when it's that small.
Right.
There's kind of two parts. There's kind of the displacement part and then the zoning part.
Yeah.
Which makes me wonder if we should try and break it up into two named sections. So the issues that are buried later on pop, but I'm just realizing that now in real time and don't have a proposed edit to make or to propose.
So Michaela,
Is
are
that
you
what you're-
talking?
Go ahead, Vanessa.
I was just going to ask, is the section that you're referring to, Michaela, the one that's on the screen right now, starting with the commission's also concerned about the balance between much needed growth
Yeah.
and the desire? Okay.
Yeah, this is a minor detail, but yeah, we could name it. Commercial
If anybody
displacement.
has ideas, sorry, what did you say?
Displacement in neighborhood centers or something.
Well, if you want to keep the alphabetized thing, you could just do neighborhood centers : and then commercial displacement, so that it stays within the same area. And you can use that format, I think, because we changed some headers earlier too, if you want to keep things together.
I'm going to scroll up to see if there are comments on the first section.
Michaela, was your name in there for what you just commented on, or was there another comment?
No, I was totally out of order, and that was a random comment. This is my actual comment for this section that Vanessa wants to talk about. Final bullet point in this section starts with all remaining residential parcels. I'm just wanting to having read the housing appendix and the city's land capacity analysis, I know what it says. So I just thought we could bring in some information to reinforce that where our belief comes from, that most of our income restricted housing in the city that exists today and that we think that will be built will be 5 to 8 stories tall. So I think I put in the chat box, adding a comma after or achieve more 5-story buildings, and then after the phrase current development trends, add and based on findings in the city's draft land capacity analysis, which can be found on pages 115 through 118. And then the next sentence, striking appropriate density 4 and saying instead, LR1 and LR2 zones do not produce density that is sufficiently affordable or accessible in neighborhood centers. And that is in the chat.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm trying to make it easier for you all to see. And Michaela, you were speaking to this bullet here, all remaining residential parcels. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Michaela, can you repeat what you wanted to strike in that paragraph?
Yes.
Because that does not show up in the chat.
It does not show up in the chat. That's correct. It's just, I don't know how to copy paste my track changes appropriately so we can see the strike throughs. In the last sentence, let me go back to my version so I can see what I did. Strike appropriate density 4. And replace density that is sufficiently affordable or accessible in. Bingo. And above that, adding, you can just make an, oh, you got it, you got it. Sorry. That's it.
Any other thoughts on this first section for neighborhood centers before we move on to commercial displacement?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay. On to neighborhood centers, commercial displacement. Give you all a minute to read this. Any thoughts on this section?
Doesn't look like it.
All right. I'm gonna move us on to open space. So the gist of this comment is a little bit of concern that the 20% of the lot area requirement may be overly restrictive. It's noted in some of the materials that OPCD produced that it is feasible to provide this minimum area of open space, but not easy to do. So it's feasible, but it's not necessarily easy. And then we tie into, you all tie in that there's more comfort with the minimum open space requirement if there were also not a parking requirement. And thankfully, parking is next in the alphabet. So we do go on to talk about no minimum parking requirements and better management of on-street parking. So it is fortuitous that these two appear sequentially in the letter.
Michaela, is your comment on this section?
Yeah, it's minor though. I'm not sure I need to read it into the record. No need to spell out numbers above 10. So 20% could be a numeral, 20.
Oh, thank you. I always forget if it's 20 or 10.
Should we spell out percent or use the percent sign?
In technical writing, you spell out percent, so you're good. You did it the right way. But I have a edit down below where it's you use the percent sign. So comment forthcoming.
Yes.
Preview. All right, if there's nothing else on open space, I'll suggest we move on to parking requirements.
All right. Okay. So here, this is not a new comment for the commission, recommending a citywide approach to management of on-street parking, and actually suggesting that there be no minimum parking requirement, I think. Yes, the commission recommends a more integrated approach to parking that includes a complete removal of parking minimums everywhere and managing on-street parking better as off-street requirements are decreased.
Michaela?
I continue to question our strategy of saying you should do this, but at minimum you should do this. But that's where we landed at our last meeting. So if we're going to leave the last sentence in there, I suggest we make it at a minimum there should instead of at a minimum there could, just because that continues to water down our argument and our request.
A second. Any other comments on parking requirements? Matt, I see.
Yeah, real quick for this is up earlier in what are we calling it now? Neighborhood centers commercial displacement section under the first bullet point, slightly expand neighborhood commercial zoning. In the same vein, let's not water down our arguments. Let's just make it expand neighborhood commercial zoning.
My question there, Matt, is just thinking about, and you've been, I think, to all the meetings. I'm wondering if, and I'll just ask the commissioners on the call if everybody is in concurrence with that, because I could be misremembering, but I'm recalling a bit of attention to wanting to expand neighborhood commercial zoning while also not expanding it so much that it displaces the smaller businesses that people are so fond of and that they get priced out of the neighborhood. So that's why I think we landed on slightly, but I will, of course, defer to commissioners on the call.
Yeah, I'm now remembering and noticing again the MR1 zoning. So we are doing more than just expanding commercial zoning by also allowing MR1 zoning. So unless anybody is really fired up by what I just said in favor, I retract my comment. Thank you. I got caught between three different words.
Dylan, I see your hand up, and then Michaela also has something.
Yeah, I think Matt just took care of it. I think slightly is appropriate just because we're kind of going in with, we need to go in with a scalpel with these and be very intentional and careful with how they're addressing zoning here. And it's confusing because there's like neighborhood commercial zoning, and then there's MR zoning that allows for some commercial, though not much will get built, and so on and so forth. So I do think that slightly is just it's representing that we want to be careful about how they approach this. And so I do think that language is appropriate in light of how else we describe what we're looking for them to do. And I had, if there are more comments on this, I have a minor other comment on what we were talking about earlier with parking.
I don't think anyone else has comments on that particular thing.
Okay, so it's just a third line up from the bottom everywhere in managing on-street parking. There's just an extra space in there. It's a minor typo. So just on dash, get rid of the space on street parking. Yep.
Thank you.
Vanessa and John, aren't you so glad to have so many technical editors?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, Michaela.
I hate group editing like this. So particularly when the whole world gets to see us catch all these little tiny things. Sorry, I do not have a comment on social housing developer. John already made them, or somebody already made the adjustment on the screen. So, but I have a comment on stacked flat bonuses when we get there.
And then you
All right.
had another thing in the chat that said mine is in a later section.
Yeah, we were still on parking, and I was just asking John to go ahead and make the edit to stack flat bonus to make the word bonus capitalized. Yeah.
Okay.
That's it.
And then Matt, your chat is that? Can you say what section that is for?
Way back at the beginning, there's an extra space in the second sentence of our letter. The paragraph starts as stewards of our city's comprehensive plan, and there's an extra space before commented there. But I didn't want to be that guy, but now that someone has said so, I'm gonna jump in.
No, that's helpful because I think for staff, if they don't know, it's helpful for them to be able to find what you're referring to. So it's good we are saying it out loud. Okay. I'm gonna move us on, I think, to social housing developer, and then we have stack flats bonus, and then we're basically at the end. So any comments on social housing developer?
So I do just want to call out to Cecilia that this section in a different form used to be up in the affordable housing bonus. And at the last meeting, we decided to separate them and just reiterate that Matt Hutchins, one of the planning commissioners who couldn't be here today, was okay with the language as proposed here. He just didn't want to lose in the letter altogether any reference to the social housing developer.
We will also spell out AMI if anyone has heartburn over that. Or should we just leave it as an acronym?
Let's spell it out.
Is it, if it's the first time it's used in the letter, spell it out.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Okay. It'll be a parentheses within a parentheses.
It's how we get ourselves into creating documents that the general public can't interpret.
Actually, instead of using the abbreviation at all, can we just write out area median income and then no abbreviation necessary because it's the only time we bring it up?
At the same time, that's a very commonly used term. So the more that we can build, and we use it all the time in our meetings, the more we can build awareness around it, it might be good.
We'll figure out, we'll consult style guides to figure out how best to do a parentheses within a parentheses.
All right. I think we're on stacked flats. And we already caught Michaela's capitalization thing. Great. Any comments on the last ending paragraph then?
I'm going to bring us back up to the beginning of the letter when there was a suggestion. Sorry, look away from the screen or else you'll get nauseous. There was a suggestion to move the last bullet on page 2 underneath the heading overarching comments on the implementation of the One Seattle plan to the conclusion. So that's one suggestion to suggest to discuss. And then there was also a comment, and I can't see the chat, so I don't know if it was resolved in the chat, about how to handle the either to let the number of questions stand as is, or to edit those questions. So I guess my first question is, how do you all feel about moving this to the end of the letter, to the conclusion?
It was also recommended to move this bullet to be the first bullet.
No, that was the bullet above. It's
Yeah, that was a
the
different-
commission
that
is
was a different bullet.
disappointed.
Okay.
This is the
Okay,
plan.
Sorry.
This is the plan.
The version I'm seeing doesn't have a bullet in front of that. Is it
Okay.
the one that says we are working toward?
No, I've got it captured. It's up on this. The commission is disappointed that this plan does not reach much beyond the minimum changes required by state mandate. The suggestion was to move that to the first bullet. And then the other suggestion was to move the last bullet to the conclusion.
We have lots of folks who want to comment on this. So we have
Okay.
Matt first, and then Andy, and then Dylan, I think, has a different topic, and then myself. So maybe Dylan will wait we'll pause yours until after this discussion. So Matt and then Andy.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. So after we went through this whole letter, I personally think we should move this paragraph to the end. The reason being is the title header of this section is overarching comments. The questions we mentioned about like additional neighborhood centers, that one's a little bit touched on, but especially like the major parks and schools having centers around there and greenways, those additional questions aren't really reflected anywhere else in the letter. And then after that, I think it's, yeah, the next sentence, we are working toward a land use model, and then going all the way to the end of the sentence, end of the paragraph. I think that really encompasses general themes well of our letter overall. And we kind of end abruptly with the stacked flat bonus being the last point, and then go into like formalities. So I think it fits really well at the end, and I'm very open to formatting the question portions, the 3 questions we ask, in a different way. I'd leave that up to, I think Dylan had a good suggestion on that earlier of reworking the paragraph itself, but content-wise, I think it fits really well at the end. That's my case.
Andy, your comments on this?
No, mine's on a different topic.
Oh, okay. All right. I have comments on this. After going through the whole letter, I think it should stay here because this point I think is too important. And if we wait till the very end, well, I should caveat this with stay here and take pieces of this and add it to the conclusion. So I think the general point needs to stay because it's up front. It's at the very beginning of the letter, and it is overarchingly more so a reminder to the city of to keep in mind as you go through all of our suggestions, we're really thinking about what does the future of growth look like for the city? And these are the questions we have been asking ourselves as we are putting forward these comments. And for me, it sets context. And then if I were to take pieces of this to put into the end, I think it's that first sentence that is really saying we want you to look further ahead and think strategically about growth and benefit patterns. And if we want to add something at the end, we say, we appreciate the work of the city and those of offices of planning, community development, ongoing work, blah, blah, blah. And then you would insert it there in the second sentence of basically this is our opportunity. We are building this for the next 20 years, and we really hope that you all are thinking strategically about this. Looking forward to hearing your comments. Blah, blah, blah.
Thoughts of other commissioners on the call?
Okay, Michaela has a response.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar about if you put it in the conclusion, it's not going to be held as a central priority. And I think it's helpful for framing. So I like what Jamie just suggested, sort of a yes and.
And Vanessa, I can suggest some specific text in the chat.
Great.
For the conclusion. Okay,
Just
for
gonna
different topics, we had Andy and then Dylan, unless anyone else has responses to this particular thing.
Yeah,
Okay,
real
go
quick,
ahead, Matt.
real quickly, yeah. I think you guys persuaded me to keep it in this. Could we possibly make it not a bulleted piece and kind of make it a separate, instead of it being like one of the three overarching, like kind of wrap up the larger three bullet points that we talk about in there? So it's kind of a conclusion for this, overarching comment section, or at least the section about like, we are working toward a land use model integrated through the land use patterns we hope to see in the future. I just think that especially is like, that's summarizing the overarching themes. Whether we put it at the end or at the end of this section, I'm indifferent. I think that it fits well after hearing what you guys said at the end of this section. But I do think we ask these three questions and then we make this separate point about like a broad overarching piece. Anyways, any other thoughts on this? I know we're almost at the end of time.
We actually have plenty of time. Our meeting is supposed to go till 5:25, so we're good. But if we end early, that's also okay. Anyone have responses or thoughts on that suggestion?
I guess I could. Vanessa, do we already have sort of an introductory section above this section?
Yes, it's pretty light. We identified concerns related to the overarching growth strategy and implementation of goals in the plan. We offer the following overarching comments to support implementation of the plan. And then we have currently four bullets, moving the third bullet to the first bullet.
Yeah.
And now we're discussing whether this fourth bullet should be a bullet or more of a conclusion to that section. And I'm just going to, for a minute, see in terms of consistency across the letter. We don't have conclusions in other sections. That doesn't mean we can't have it in the overarching comments, because overarching is overarching.
I mean, what if that bullet point just becomes the beginning of the paragraph that's underneath the header, overarching comments on the implementation? So it's basically, we say that bullet point and then it goes, and then at the end it says, while reviewing the growth and all this stuff, we've identified these specific overarching comments and concerns.
Yeah, that might work better. And I would empower staff. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah,
Vanessa.
I was gonna say I would empower staff to figure out a solution.
And to like knit it together with like, because you might need some additional filler and fluff and framing in order to make it work appropriately.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that also, that also leaves open the three questions that are in there, which I know Dylan had a suggestion on. Like, do those become bullet points in themselves? I think the reason I'm so fixed on this is it does seem like a really good a really good section. And so I don't want us to lose what we got at all. And I want it to be amplified, you know?
So I appreciate the confidence that you all have in staff. I just want to make sure, given the fact that our meeting on Tuesday to approve this letter, we have 15 minutes set aside. And we're at the, we're going on 2 hours of this work. We simply do not have, we do not have the luxury on Tuesday morning of doing anything other than saying I approve or I don't approve of the letter. So I just want to be clear that the work that John is taking on heroically tomorrow to incorporate all these, that there's real clarity, because we do not have time on Tuesday as a group to further refine the letter. So what I'm hearing right now, the last suggestion I heard, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is to take the highlighted portion of the bullet you see right now and move that to the conclusion, and then take the rest of this bullet and move it actually to the beginning of this
That
section.
I think you're referring
Yes?
to what I was suggesting, and that's not what I was suggesting. So,
Okay.
so
Then I got it wrong.
I, for the sake of simplicity and time, I think it's nice to have up there, but I am okay with it being a separate bullet point where it is right now for the sake of, I think it still conveys the same stuff. It's still an overarching comment. Like I don't think it like breaks it to have to deal with a really complex fix.
Other reaction?
I'm open to keeping it how it is for sake of time and workload. Especially, I don't know if we're going to circle back to the questions in the paragraph though. I don't really think we do that anywhere else in the letter of like asking questions. So maybe finding a place for those in a different format or way, but keeping this bullet point in the same place. Because I do think it's important. So if it stays to the front, I'm okay with that. But maybe revisit the.
Dylan, what was your suggestions? Just to make sure we're all on the same page. What is the suggestion on how to format that?
It was, yeah, I was reading the older version where there were, the questions were bulleted, but it was just the introduction to the questions was, for example, the plan should respond to the following questions. So we're giving kind of a direction, which is what Michaela had been pointed out. So, for example, the plan should respond to the following questions. Then it lays out, how can the city lay the groundwork for adding more neighborhood centers in the future? Can we get the ball rolling? And so on and so forth.
So basically going back to the old formatting.
I didn't mind them, as I know it's unique to have like the second indent for the bullets, but at the same time they get lost. I feel like they do get lost in this paragraph here. And if, depending on how much weight we want to put on them, they definitely stand out when they're bulleted. But they do get a little bit lost here. And I do think this paragraph is really important. And I think it's a good one. And I don't mind drawing extra attention to it.
So just to make sure we're all on the same page, the suggestion would be to keep this here and to bullet out the questions. Is everyone okay with that? Okay, I'm seeing some thumbs. Okay, so hopefully that makes it a little easier for you, Vanessa.
Thank you.
We had Andy on a different topic and then Dylan.
Okay, toward the end, there was something about a quarter-mile distance, which is a fairly standard distance for physical activity, and it's usually seen as 5 minutes for a quarter mile. I was a little surprised to see the 4 minutes in other places. I'd suggest we make it 5 minutes and quarter mile, because that's kind of standard in public health, is 5 minutes and quarter mile.
This is referring to the stacked flats bonus section, Vanessa.
There were two different sections. One talked about 4 minutes, and another one talked about quarter mile. Yeah.
Yeah,
so,
the
yeah.
quarter mile reference is in the stacked flag bonus
Okay.
section. Yeah.
And the
It's also
4
in the
minute.
neighborhood. It's also in the neighborhood centers. The quarter mile is referenced twice in the letter, once in neighborhood centers and once in the other.
So can we move from 4 to 5 minutes to be consistent? Because that's generally 5 minutes is considered a quarter mile.
I think the question I would ask for that for Vanessa and John is the 4 minutes that is used in here, is that explicitly a number that OPCD is using? And that's why
Yes.
we said 4 minutes?
Yes. And
Okay.
in a previous version of the letter, we had a quarter mile in one place and 4 minutes in another. And so we, as staff, combined the two, and I did look it up, and a quarter mile is easily walkable for 4 minutes. Not all abilities can. Yeah. Sorry.
I would just say most literature uses 5 minutes for a quarter mile. I mean, yeah, it could be either, but to me, it's more consistent to stick with 5 minutes and a quarter mile, but I'll go with whatever you do.
And I'll just reiterate what Jamie said. I think we were going with the 4 minutes because that's what OPCD already uses. And so we're referencing the fact, use something that the city already uses. But again, that was the rationale of the various conversations, and we will do what the commissioners on the call want to do.
I wonder if, like, is that something we could footnote, Vanessa, and just say, like, if you footnote and say, like, heads up, a lot of the predominant literature says 5 minutes for a quarter mile, or something like that.
We could do that. That would mean that the letter has only one footnote or endnote, which I'm okay with, but it then begs the question, do other points also need footnotes, which we're not going to be able to
put it in parentheses at the end of the sentence, something like that. It doesn't have to be a footnote.
I just like the only thing is, like, how to mention it without making it a whole new point is what I'm trying to figure out.
Right. And I'm scrolling through to find where it's first referenced, because I think we do tie it to the fact that OPCD uses that. John, you said you knew.
It's in the neighborhood centers section. The first bullet in the neighborhood centers, which
there it is.
Says expand neighborhood center boundaries to encompass a minimum radius of 1/4 mile, approximately a 4-minute walk.
It is
Right, a
also
little
in,
context.
So we had a couple folks talk at the same time. Who has a comment on this particular bullet or suggestion on how we can approach it? Looks like we've got several hands, and I've also got several people in the chat. I'm not sure which of those is for this particular thing. But I think I heard Matt. I also see some other people have hands up, which unfortunately my thing doesn't allow me to see all the people who have hands up. So I see Dylan's hands up, Matt hands up, and then there's another hand that I don't know whose it is because Teams is not allowing me to see other people on the screen. So if you can put your name in the chat if you have a comment on this one, that would be helpful. So maybe let's start with Matt and then Dylan and then whoever else had a comment on this.
Yep. Okay. So my suggestion would be, me and Michaela both noticed that the 4-minute walk is also in arterials and frequent transit section, which is the first time it's mentioned as far as I've seen. If we can just cite, in parentheses, OPCD, and then whatever study they're using for the 4-minute walk shed, and then we decide it once. And I think we can, use that going forward in the other 2 or 3 places that we use it.
Okay, I think
Yeah,
Cecilia had her hand up too on this, and I didn't see it. Go ahead, Cecilia.
Yeah, I mean, I think right there, it already references that this is being used by OBCD in that sentence. So I feel pretty strongly, I mean, this like highlights, yeah, I feel pretty strongly that we use the city's language for the 4-minute, even though like I have not heard anyone talking to the 4-minute city outside of this. But yeah, I think that especially when we're trying to argue to match their criteria that they already have, I think it's pretty important to use what they're doing.
Dylan?
Yeah, so the city's been using 1,000 feet at neighborhood centers and equating that to a 4-minute walk, which is appropriate based off of what Andy was saying. That typically 5 minutes is a quarter mile, 10 minutes is a half mile. And so we're kind of saying two things. We're using the city language, which I think is appropriate for a 4-minute walk. Even though we would like to see these neighborhood centers bigger, we want to see them be a 5-minute walk. We want to see them be a quarter mile. But we're stating two different things when we say 4-minute walk or a quarter mile. And I think we need to pick one. It's probably more powerful just to use the city's language. If that's the direction we want to go, because that allows us to then use 4-minute for neighborhood centers, allows us to use 4-minute for the arterials, and there's a consistency there, and we're already working with the city language, but it is at the same time it's not calling for a specific expansion of the baseline neighborhood center boundary, which we do call for elsewhere. We just don't list out what that expansion should be. So I think when we reference 4-minute, we should probably just keep it at 4-minute and perhaps remove a reference to a distance. So we're consistent with our language and with standard sort of, standard communication in the planning world for how long it takes to walk a certain distance.
But Dylan, are you saying that the city has conflicting?
No.
They're using conflicting guidance. Like one is like 1,000 feet
We do.
for 4 minutes, and the other is like a quarter mile is 4 minutes.
That's us. We're doing that. The city is typically saying 1,000 feet for a neighborhood center or a 4-minute walk.
Okay.
And I think we have talked in the past about wanting to see an expansion of these neighborhood centers to a quarter mile, but the city is consistent with saying 4-minute walk, just 1,000 feet. And I think we just need to be consistent in our language as well, and probably just use a 4-minute walk rather than trying to get into the specifics of, just so we're consistent with using the language that they're using.
That would mean get rid of the word quarter mile and put in 1,000 feet, and then you are consistent.
I'm going to suggest sticking with a 4-minute walk because that most people who aren't planners or public health experts, they understand how long it takes them to walk 4 minutes, but you say 1,000 feet versus a quarter mile, and that I think a 4-minute walk is more approachable. And I agree with Dylan that in our letter, we were inconsistent because we are using a quarter mile to equate to 4 minutes when it's not.
I guess the other question is, are we okay, proposing for neighborhood centers to expand their boundaries to expand, to a quarter mile and leaving it at that, and just not having the link between. I mean, we kind of lose our link that we're using for arterials back to the neighborhood center boundary. We're starting to get into the weeds here, but
this whole plan is the weeds.
I know. Well, currently the neighborhood centers are a 4-minute walk. That's what the city is proposing. They're proposing a 1,000-foot radius. We want to see that a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
And perhaps it still works. Perhaps we can say expand neighborhood centers boundaries to encompass a minimum radius of a quarter mile and leave it at that. And then when we go into arterials, we can still utilize the same language that the city is using for their neighborhood center baseline of a 4-minute walk. And we don't have to have them align perfectly with neighborhood center boundaries.
So I have several folks who want to comment on this still. So I have
Sorry.
me and then Matt again, Cecilia, Michaela, and then Cecilia again, I think is what I see in here.
And before we start, sorry to interrupt you, Jamie, I do want to do a time check. And it's common that we get stuck on a really small thing towards the end of 2+ hours conversation. So I do want to, at least, we don't have any public comment, but I do want to make sure we leave 5 minutes at the end for John and I to let you all know how we're going to proceed in taking the comments from today. So thank you.
So maybe I should check. We have this mess of things, and then Dylan had one last comment on arterials and frequent transit corridors. Were there any other topics that people had comments on? Okay, so I think we should be able to finish on time, Vanessa. We just have to wrap this discussion up probably in the next like 4 minutes or so. Okay, so we have, and correct me if I get this wrong, I have myself, Matt, Cecilia, Michaela still commenting on this particular topic. Is that right?
I think Cecilia was like the very first one in the chat on this topic a long time ago.
Yeah, she commented once already.
Oh, sorry.
The name isn't again, so I wanted to make sure. I think it was a follow-up.
Okay.
Is that I just want to double check. All of those folks good to, okay. All right. So I think my comment was the suggestion to keep the quarter mile distance rather than a time. I feel like time is really arbitrary depending on who it is, right? Like, and we make this assumption about ability and you know, I think for this particular bullet point, where we reference the 4 minutes in other places we are specifically referencing the city's use of 4 minutes, which I think is fine. But if this particular bullet, we're talking about the boundaries, and if we're not giving specific like distances, then it becomes arbitrary and squishy for the city to be able to, you know, change where that is and or interpret our suggestion, right? And 1,000 feet or the 4 minute walk equaling 1,000 feet thing is smaller than a quarter mile. It's like 0.19 or something. And if we're really intending to expand those, I would lean towards the quarter mile suggestion. So that's my comment for this particular bullet point. Matt, and then Cecilia, and then Michaela.
I was pretty much in agreement with what you just said right there, Jamie. I think we should keep it as a quarter mile. I like the 4 minute walk shed as a visual, but we're losing based on using 4 minutes instead of a quarter mile, like 360 feet in radius from the city center, which is like 30% bigger than what would be done with 4 minutes. So it's a pretty sizable chunk that we're losing. And what I'm trying to decide is, should we replace all 4 minute walk sheds with a quarter mile, or is that adding too much new material too late into the game? And I don't know what I can't find the other instance though of the 4 minute walk shed. There's this in the neighborhood center, and is it the arterials, the other one?
Yes.
Arterials is the other one, and that's the one I found. And that one, just find the sentence. Yeah, and especially when we're talking about frequent transit, they usually use a quarter mile designation either way. So I think in that case, we should also use a quarter mile from the arterial to expand denser housing opportunities. We recommend using a quarter mile distance from the arterial. That's what I would raise. I don't know if we even have quorum to make that decision, but here we are.
It's okay. Cecilia.
I think most of my comments been mostly covered, but I do think for the transit, I do like how we're using what the city's already established is a good metric for neighborhood centers, and like why isn't that a good, like, yeah, using their metric and like asking them like why are we not expanding this other important area in the same way? Yeah.
Michaela. Oh wait, you said never mind.
No, I do now have an opinion. I know we all want to be done with this, and what I'm about to say means that maybe I'm on a different page, but when I first kind of commented on this in the first couple of meetings, I was pretty consistent with saying a 5-minute walk in both the neighborhood centers and the arterials. It's consistent with the policy position that the Complete Communities Coalition has taken on this issue. So I just shared a link to that in the chat if you want to verify their comments. And I am kind of in the camp of Andy of like leading on rather than OPCD, who's established metrics that may be informed by, the desire to minimize impacts and changes across the city. I would prefer to be using public health and kind of academic and planning best practices in terms of how we think about what is walkable and how far of a distance an individual is actually willing to walk to go catch a bus or something like that. So I'm more in the 5-minute walk shed, but if we want to find a compromise, I think just calling everything a quarter mile is fine. With that said, in a city that has a lot of hills and a lot of like freeways and arterials, one reason walk sheds is sort of beneficial is it can have a component of distance sometimes doesn't account for the fact that like a hill or something slows you, or I-5 slows you down. So just I don't care as much about that, but I do sort of kind of prefer to align with best practices and not necessarily what the city's using, because I'm not exactly sure what's driving the city's use of a 4-minute rather than a 5-minute walk.
So I'm going to suggest that we be consistent, and it like either a quarter mile, either a 4-minute walk, either a 5-minute walk, and maybe we just take a vote on it because we do. And please put your name in the chat. So because Jamie can't monitor both the chat and the hand. So
Yes.
Jamie, I defer to you as chair, how you want to handle this.
Yes, please put your vote for either I know I see Matt, is your hand a comment?
Yeah, no, it's a clarification. I'm screaming in math teacher right now. So we have established a 5-minute walk is equal to a quarter mile. So if we are talking about minutes, if it's the decision between 4 and 5 minutes, we're talking about two different distances. And I was advocating for a quarter mile. I'm even more advocating for a 5-minute walk shed being the language we use, because that is, those are equal distances, 5-minute walk and quarter mile according to. So I think there should only be two options to vote on if we do vote, 5-minute or 4-minute. That's my eager comment.
How do people feel about having two options in this vote? Are you okay with the 2-option vote? Any opposition to having a 2-option vote? And this is a come off mute and tell me if you have opposition. Okay. If I don't hear anyone, then we are going to vote right now to either 5 minutes or a quarter mile. So please put in the chat right now, 5 minutes or a quarter mile.
Isn't it 5 minutes or 4 minutes? I'm so confused now. It's 5 minutes or 4 minutes because 5 minutes and a quarter mile are the same, right?
Yeah. Okay. So then I'm confused on the two options.
Okay. Then
I thought
let's
we were
clarify
all
this.
in agreement in wanting the farther distance. So, but it sounds like
I
we're
think
not. Okay.
I think we are. I think we are. That's why I don't even know if we need to vote in the first place. But if we do vote, I think the vote should be in terms of minutes, not the same miles and minutes. You know, because if we're saying 5 minutes or a quarter mile, we're saying the same thing, just in different wording.
Rose, you have your hand up.
Yeah, would it solve it if we say a quarter mile and then in parentheses about 5 minutes if flat at average walking speed?
I'm wondering if we still have Andy, and if so, if Andy can, maybe Andy has a handy reference from literature that they use. Do you know something off the top of your head, I guess, would be my question.
I don't have a reference. I'm just blending everything I'm hearing.
Andy, are you able to comment on it at all?
I see him sitting in the lobby. Oh. It's okay.
Oh,
Oh, he missed our exhilarating discussion of time and distance.
I hit the wrong button and it kicked me out and then I couldn't get back in.
I put an explanation in words of what I was trying to say in the chat if you want to see what I'm saying, Jamie.
Yes, I understand that. I think the question is, are we all in agreement that we are choosing 5 minutes or a quarter mile as what our reference is? Or are there people that still want the 4-minute reference? And then the decision is, do we do 5 or do we do the quarter mile?
I understand.
Is that what the decision is? Okay.
I understand. Thank you.
Okay.
That seems clear.
All right. I'm going to move as quickly because we have like 2 minutes before we need to give Vanessa some time at the end. So I'm just going to do a rapid fire, like 2 votes. Okay. Vote 1. It's 4 or 5. You're putting the number 4 or the number 5 in the chat. This is about minutes. So 4 minutes or 5 minutes as your votes. All right. Everyone so far is 5. Okay. Vote 2. Should we be referring to this said distance of 5 minutes as 5 minutes or as a quarter mile in the letter? So put miles or minutes as your second vote.
Vanessa, could we, it's very meta right now. Could we go back to the document?
It is very meta. Okay, we have four folks saying minutes, 3 saying miles, and then Andy suggested or both. Vanessa, if we did both, is that too confusing for OPCD since they've been using a 4-minute? I think we lost Vanessa.
No, sorry, somebody
Okay.
else has the room right after us, so we really do just have 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I saw something pop up. Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
So there was a suggestion by Andy just to put both minutes and miles of 5 minutes or a quarter mile. Do you think that would be too confusing with OPCD using a 4 minute, or do you think they would get that we're asking for a larger boundary?
I think that if everybody on the call is in agreement on that, I think we need to move on from this. And I think it's important to talk about, but 5, because there's been such a lot of talk about it, I'd say 5 minutes or a quarter of a mile and leave that to OPCD.
Are people okay with that suggestion from Andy? I'm seeing a thumbs up from Michaela. Any strong objections to doing both and using the 5, 5? Yes, and Rose, I do recognize you suggest that early on. I think folks were confused about the 4 versus 5, so we had to break that down a little bit. So thank you all for your patience. Dylan, you had one other really. Oh, I'm hearing some echoing. One other really minor thing about arterials. Do you want to just like say that really quickly?
Yeah, I just put it in the chat. It's just adding a little bit of clarification to the text if we're going to remove the images. And the clarification is just we're talking about these different street types in the Seattle Transportation Plan and relating them back to the future land use plan. So the zoning maps from the comprehensive plan. And I think just the first bullet, we can just make the point, that the main streets, destination streets, should be the hearts of the urban centers and neighborhood centers. And then make the point that these street types already largely align with the proposed zoning that define the commercial cores of urban centers and neighborhood centers. And as I read it, that was what the intent of the image was to show that they align. So maybe we can just state that. And if we use some language similar to what I wrote, these street types already largely align. We're not saying all of them do, but most of them do. So there's already precedent for alignment of street types with the land use map. And we're just saying there should be additional alignment. Take it further, getting better alignment. And that's what the subsequent 2 points make.
Okay, great. Andy, you have a different topic. We have 2 minutes left and there are folks after us. Can you do it quickly?
No, I do not have anything. That was an old note.
Oh, that was an old one. Thank you. I have the suggested text from the conclusion that we talked about, just that we talked about earlier. It's in the chat. It's just adding that little sentence from that bullet point. If you're okay with that, please thumbs up. If you aren't, then please put it in the chat while Vanessa is talking.
Great. All right. Well, thank you all. This was a very productive 2.5 hours, albeit very painful, because it's hard to write a letter with 10 people. So I appreciate you all being willing to dig in. I'm gonna stop sharing here. The plan was to be editing in real time. So at the end, we would have time to go through and see all the comments. And we just had a lot more comments than I anticipated. So I appreciate the comments earlier that you have confidence in staff. So John will be integrating your comments tomorrow. And Olivia will take a look at those comments before sending them out on Monday, and we will do our very best they will do their very best. I'm actually out of the office, unfortunately, but I will be there on Tuesday morning, and just want to reiterate that that Tuesday morning will be really a 15 minutes of thumbs up or thumbs down, and we won't be able to accommodate edits. If you do see typos or misspellings, or grammatical technical things, those are things that we as staff can change after the letter is approved. But we cannot make substantive comments or even rewording because that doesn't reflect the work of you all. So again, thank you for sticking it out for 2.5 hours as we group edited this letter and for all of your work to get to this point.
All right. With that, Vanessa, are we, do you have any public comment or are we adjourning?
We have no public comment and we
Okay.
are adjourning.
Great. On time, 1 minute late. Thank you all so much for your work and your labor. It's super helpful to have all the stuff in the chat. So thank you so much to our staff who have worked so hard to take all our comments and all the work sessions over the last couple of months. I know a lot of people and all of you have put in a lot of work into this. And this is probably one of the most critical things we do as a commission is commenting on the comp plan and these major changes. So thank you all for your service to the city. All right. With that, we're adjourned.
Thank you.